Okay, this is our group for our speeches, and I'm going to go ahead and start. My name is Cheyenne Montgomery, and I'm going to be presenting on parent education and family resources. So my family was a foster adopt family for 14 years while I was growing up and has adopted 6 children through foster care in Washington State. In 2010, we adopted my twin brothers, who were 4, and my sister, who was 3. While signing paperwork, the judge told my parents, "We're breaking a cycle right here." The cycle the judge was referring to was the well-proved link between a parent's incarceration, antisocial, or delinquent behavior and their child's similar cycled behavior. Many people will blame poverty, lack of education, substance abuse, and other factors for why these cycles exist. And to some extent, all of these do play a part. But what if instead of needing to give at-risk children and youth new parents in totally different circumstances in order to break this cycle, how can we enable more parents who are at risk to not only be successful as individuals, but also successful parents? I want to address the importance of parent education, resources, and involvement in our community. Family life education started out with a large surge of self-help books and small support groups in the mid-20th century, and expanded through the Morrill Act that started home economics because the family was seen as the catalyst for positive change in society. Increase the skill and potential of the family, increase the skill and potential of society as a whole. Over the last several decades, the hype for family education may have died down, but the resources haven't, and the need for it certainly hasn't. Some might even say that the need for family education has increased. Studies have shown that positive changes when parents engage in parent education programs. For example, a parents' education program designed to prevent future behavior problems in aggressive preschoolers exhibited positive change, and this effect was sustained in a follow-up test 2 years later. I mentioned in a post for our discussion board last week that renowned psychologist and relationship expert John Gottman has stated that we have resources to help children and families to be resilient, but we're not using them. Why is that? What are the reasons? I think people don't know how to access them before they're in a crisis mode. If parents have skills and resources early, they can prevent or break the destructive family cycle. Learning how to cope as a family unit when difficulties arise can be as essential as providing milk to an impoverished mother. Youth who grow up in families characterized by overt family conflict, potential substance use or abuse, and have neglect or unsupportive family relationships are more likely to engage in risky behaviors. Currently, my family is working heavily with a team of counselors to help one of my twin brothers. He's now 10, and he's struggling with PTSD and reactive attachment disorder from his previous birth parents. It's taken months of doctor's appointments, counseling sessions, and 2 calls to the police before my parents and brother have been able to get the help they need. My parents have a stable relationship with each other. They have 30 years of experience parenting and have worked with over 50 children besides their own, yet their knowledge and personal resources were maxed. How much more difficult may it be for young or struggling parents who have maxed their own capabilities? In our society, there can often be a stigma surrounding counseling or parenting education in general. Everyone has a family. Everyone should be able to function in a family. In my observation, sometimes parents feel guilt that they can't do it on their own. Really, we should be able to help parents feel grateful that they don't have to do it on their own. So, in looking for some resources, we've gotten a little more experience as a family doing this. And instead of doing an international, national, or state level, I wanted to do a local level. So I did a Google search first, and I want to share my screen for a minute. This is a nationwide organization, but it can be applied locally. This is called Child Welfare Information Gateway, and I hope you guys can see it. Anyways, this was one of the websites that I found that has a lot of resources. If you look on the right side, there's different programs: early childhood care and education, employment training, housing, health, farther down, there's home visiting, parent education. So we're going to just click on parent education for a minute. Here it lists several different kinds of sites, classes, things that parents can do to get involved and to get help. On the right side again, there's spotlights for community services, research articles, different things that parents can find. So this was just a Google search. It was the second or third option that I found just Googling it. So we have the resources, but people aren't using them. So how can we distribute these more? This may look different depending on if it's a government approach or an organizational approach. Specific teams could be organized to make it easier to access these resources. Maybe families who are using WIC or welfare programs can get access to parenting classes and events as well. From an organizational standpoint, why not use stronger advertising or even product placement per se to spread the word? We need more high-profile people on our team, on our side, helping to advocate for these things. In order for our society to function, we need parents. We need parents present, we need parents informed and educated, and we need parents ready. Thanks for watching.
That was really good. I had a question about the website that you found. It's not a local one. It was just something you Googled.
Yeah.
So it's not specific. So when you say classes that are available, where are those classes available at?
So let me go back to that. So I said local originally because I was planning on sharing local ones. But I ran out of time, so I just went to the one that I'd looked into more. This is it. So that was on my fault. I shouldn't have said local.
Okay, so when you click on those classes, what does it bring up?
So are you seeing my screen again?
Yeah, it's just really small.
So first, okay, let me show you this first. Up here, there's state resources, and you can go to the specific state you're looking for. So that one would show you state specific. But clicking on these, this one says 24/7 Dad, National Fatherhood Initiative. So if you click on it, it takes you to another website where you could find more. This one is an online-based one, it looks like. So bundles for mom, bundles for dad, handbooks, other resources, Spanish, recruit dad, certificates, training. So it's another resource. So not necessarily classes, but a website. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. I was just wondering. You said local, so that answered my question. That's really awesome that your parents are foster parents and have taken in so many kids. I have huge respect for foster parents.
Thank you. Other thoughts or comments? Okay. No one else has comments. We can go to the next person. Yes.
Something, but she's on mute.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, my button, I kept pushing it and it wasn't stopping. I just wanted to tell you that was really interesting that you pulled up a web page. I was just going to reference stuff like that in my thing. So good job on your presentation. Where is the share my screen on this?
If you go to the left, there's hover.
Oh, the green arrow?
The green arrow, and then you can click on it and show which screen you want to share.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, is that it for Cheyenne? Okay, Lindsay, you're
okay. That was really good. I do not want to go after that one. That was so good. Okay. Oh, and just to forewarn you, sometimes my internet goes in and out, but it takes me like 10 seconds to reconnect. So I'll fix it if I like stop talking all of a sudden. Okay, so the threat that I would like to speak on is sex education. Out of every industrialized country in the world, the United States has the highest teenage birth rate. And our failing sex education programs is part of that blame. In many high schools, including my own high school, sex ed wasn't being taught at all. 1 in 4 girls will become pregnant by their 20th birthday, and these mothers are less likely to finish high school, and they're more likely than their peers to live in poverty, depend on public assistance, and be in poor health. And then the children to these teen moms are more likely to suffer health and cognitive disadvantages, come in contact with child welfare and correctional systems, live in poverty, drop out of high school, and become teen parents themselves. So this is a huge threat to the family. And it's unfair that many teen moms and their children are becoming subject to a harder life when this could have been prevented with something as simple as better sex education. In the United States, parents are reluctant to talk to their children about safe sex and consequences of sex. And this was the case for my own parents and my friends' parents. It's kind of a taboo topic, and my parents had this one awkward talk about sex with me, and then that was it. And that was the case for my friends too. So parents need to be more open about the subject with their kids, and schools need to have more comprehensive sex ed, because we can't just knock on every parent's door to make sure that they've talked to their own child about sex. So because of this lack of education, teens are making misinformed decisions. The CDC indicates that 47% of all high school students say that they have sex. So these are just the statistics of those who are willing to admit that they have sex. So we know that number is actually a lot higher. And adolescents represent 25% of the sexually active population, but they acquire half of all new STIs, and that's 9.8 million cases a year. So although I mentioned it is primarily the parents' responsibility to teach their child about safe sex, that just isn't happening. So that's why I feel it's important to require schools to give some type of proper sex ed to their students. But parents should definitely have the right for their child to opt out from sex ed too if they feel uncomfortable with the school educating their child on sex, because of course a parent should have rights over what their child is learning regarding sex education. Okay, sorry guys. Okay, so there are 2 main forms of sex ed in the United States, and that's comprehensive sex ed and abstinence only. Oh gosh. Oh, is it still working? Okay, you guys looked frozen. Okay, so the abstinence only programs have proven to be ineffective. And although these programs do delay when these students initiate sex, these students are less likely to use contraceptives when they do end up having sex. So sex ed should include abstinence, but needs to also include medically accurate information on contraceptives, inform them on HIV, how to protect themselves, and give biologically and medically accurate information. And many states have passed statutes that require the curriculum to be reviewed by the Department of Health Services to avoid misinformation. And this information should also be age appropriate by grade. While each state has their slightly varying standards for sex ed, the one commonality is that it does need to be improved. Only 13 states in the nation require sex ed to be medically accurate, so a lot of it is left up to the interpretation of whoever is the teacher giving the sex ed class. And so not all teens are getting the message, and that needs to change for the sake of the teens' health and for the sake of their future family's well-being. And then for sure, parents should have access to the entire sex ed curriculum that the school is providing, so they can read through it and determine whether or not they're okay with their child listening in on that, or if they want their child to opt out, and if they just want to have their own talk with their child. So I was looking at some of the statutes in different states, and Illinois, for example, has passed sex education legislation that I thought was more appropriate than some of the other states. So in Illinois, it's required for sex ed to be developmentally and age appropriate, medically accurate, evidence-based, and complete. It requires comprehensive sex ed to be offered in grades 6 through 12 that includes both abstinence and contraception for the prevention of pregnancy and STDs. And it requires the State Board of Education to make all that information available so the parents can read through it, and it allows parents to opt out. So, as I've already mentioned, I think it's crucial that parents are involved in the process. So if you're worried about what your child is being taught or not taught in school about sex ed, that you should get involved. States do have standards for what's being taught, but each school also has a lot of power to refine the sex ed according to what the culture is in the area. So get on the school board and see what's going on, see what they have to offer, and make sure it's being taught appropriately and accurately. And so let's give our teens a better chance to succeed, especially if it starts with something as simple as education. So, questions?
What resources did you use for gathering the statistics that you gave? Where are those from?
Let me look on my...
Not all of them, but like the
there
main...
was...
Is that CDC or is it National
there
Health
was
Statistics?
the CDC's, and then, yes, the national... I can click on my link right here, but it was a governmental website that I got this from. I can click on it right now so I can like give the... Okay, yeah. The NCSL, National Conference of State Legislature, is where I got a lot of my information about... standards throughout
Teen
different
pregnancies.
states.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So how do you propose getting it into the schools and getting the schools to endorse that?
I think that's something that needs to be done probably on a state level. Just national, I feel like that's just too big of a scope, and it's too varying with the different cultures in each state. So I think that's probably something that each state should look at, like, what are we requiring and how can we try to enforce this so there's at least some type of information getting out to the students who just don't really know anything. So that would be my guess.
You talked about age appropriate.
Mhm.
When do you think age appropriate would be? Is that, I know some elementary schools have this in 5th grade, others have things in high school. When's age appropriate?
Yeah,
and
that's a
how
really
do you
good
decide
question.
for parents?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I thought about this myself because, like, thinking about my own child, it's like kind of scary if they start really young. But then I think about the children who, I think at least by middle school, that's when kids start having sex now. So I think it, like 5th or 6th grade, I think is when you could start very gently. Like, you don't have to give a very graphic talk to them at that young, but I think that's when you should gently, I would say 6th grade, because that's when middle school starts in a lot of schools. For me personally, is what I would think.
Mhm.
I did like that you said parents should be able to opt out if they want to
Yes.
discuss that separately.
Mm-hmm.
Have access to it.
Outlined Illinois and how they do it there. I was like, man, that sounds pretty good to me. I don't know from what I heard, but it seems like they covered almost everything in that. It's just like make sure it's age appropriate, parents are involved, and they can opt out if they want. I'm like, man, maybe I need to move to Illinois or something. But
Yeah, they had a pretty comprehensive overview for their state. Because yeah, in an ideal world, like, I would love for every parent to just do that themselves and it wouldn't have to go into schools. But then I think about like the parents who do talk to their kids, like those really aren't the kids that we're worried about. It's the parents who aren't involved that aren't going to hear it from their parents anyway.
Or the parents that don't care about, I mean, there's parents
Yeah,
that don't care what their teenagers are
Right.
doing. Kids will be kids,
exactly.
they'll do it anyway,
Yeah.
and they're
Mhm.
they're not getting that education. And I like how you pointed out that it was going to be medically accurate and
Yes.
making
And
it,
STIs.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah, talking about STIs is huge. I live in a little college town, and our family practitioner, every time you walk in, she tells, like, our kids are 14 and 16, and she'll say, has anyone talked to you about sex? And I don't mean just like don't have sex. Do you know what an STI is? And she'll ask my kids, well, tell me what gonorrhea is, tell me what chlamydia is. And it's interesting that my kids have learned this. I had someone come over to my house, a boy that was like 17, trying to date my daughter. And I asked him what he knew about STIs. And boy, his face just went like, man, this is creepy. Your mom's talking to me about sex. That's gross. But I told my daughter, because I read in one of these reports that exactly what you just said, Michelle, kids that don't know about it are the ones that need this training, because they're the ones that are catching the STIs and spreading them because they don't have the education. They don't know. And if they did, everybody would be better off. So yes. And also there was another statistic that said they actually think about sex all the time, way more than the kids that are educated about it. And it's
scary.
just, so now that's my question. I told my daughter, I said, never freak out again. Just prep your boo. Next time you bring some boy over here, I'm going to ask him what he knows about STIs. And if he looks at me like I'm an alien, then he has to leave. Now, if he pulls out his little handbook that his mom gave him, then he's approved.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, he never came back again.
Thanks, Lindsay. I think that's a great topic. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Hey, Camille, you ready?
Hey. Can you guys hear me okay? I kind of have been sick this week, so hopefully I can talk loud.
I think you gotta kind of keep your
so-
microphone up. You have a hard time hearing you.
Okay. Try this out. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just talk loud. Okay, so my name's Camille Pingle, and my threat on the family was we're going to cover the effects of poor education that has on families. So a very close family member of mine has been a hard worker all of his life. My father-in-law is an incredible example of perseverance and strength to our family. But one line of guidance he has given us several times before is finish your schooling. Just do it and you won't regret it. I've heard this from a lot of different people, but he gives us his counsel because he never completed his college degree and sorely wishes he had done so. He did finish his high school career and continued on to higher education, but life just got in the way. He ended up never being able to go back and finish his degree and only spent about 1 year there before he moved on to try and bring money to his young growing family. Ever since then, he has spent backbreaking and frustrating years doing his best to provide for his family without the formal education he desired. Now, this is not to say that he was disadvantaged or prevented in any way from receiving a quality education, but circumstances just didn't allow it. In contrast, there are many individuals and families throughout the world and United States who suffer due to the lack of quality educational opportunities. This can be seen in a poor educational background or just a very limited amount of schooling. My father's experience and the experiences of those other individuals throughout the world could be yours, your sister's, your husband's, or your child's. The United States educational system has a proclaimed goal of providing equal opportunity to its citizens. The ultimate outcome is to provide fulfilling lives to all and give opportunities to be a part of a hardworking and thriving middle class. Education within the United States provides different entities in which multiple generations are taught, like private and public elementary, secondary schools, pre-K and kindergarten, educational childcare, homeschooling, the list goes on and on. Educational is one crucial way that this can be achieved. However, this is not always achieved, although many wish it were so. While education is claimed to be universally accessible, some individuals are not granted that access due to low income, low socioeconomic status, geographic location, and other factors. Although the rate of graduating young adults has been increasing in the recent years, this statistic is not where we need or want it to be yet. As of 2015, statistics show that 7% of our youth are not graduating with high school diplomas or the equivalent. In relation to this, about 8% of teenagers ages 16 through 19 are not enrolled in school, nor are they working in the employment market. This level of education is a very widespread and acknowledged certification that many jobs require as a minimum. In the year 2008, there were over 3 million students that dropped out of high school, presenting a large problem to those individuals. When individuals have a lower educational background, their children have about a 15% chance of obtaining a college or university level education and are 6 times as likely to drop out of secondary school. Children who are disadvantaged, whether in socioeconomics or any other way, go on to receive smaller salaries and even to live shorter lives. According to some studies, having less educational attainment is associated with lower income and social status, impaired cognitive development, little to no adherence to medical treatment, unhealthy behaviors, and diminished social connections and psychological well-being. The lack of education, according to these studies, can't be beneficial for individuals or families. Those adults who experience lower levels of education also are more susceptible to divorce, which can cause even more worrisome outcomes for families involved. Now, this is not to say that my close family members involved in the situation are developmentally incapable and handicapped in that nature. My father-in-law is a very smart and determined individual who was able to overcome through his circumstances and knowledge without a college degree. His children have all completed high school and many have completed secondary and further education. However, not all individuals get that opportunity, as research indicates. One recent act that's been implemented by the government in the US in order to improve these situations is the Every Student Succeeds Act. This was passed in December of 2018, and it actually used to be the No Child Left Behind Act, which was passed in 2002. The NCLB's Act requirements were too inapplicable for some states, so the Obama administration and experts improved the law and allowed students to be better educated and prepared for college and future careers. Let's see, sorry, just going to the next page here. This act was passed and it's meant to protect disadvantaged children, provide high standards of curriculum, establish higher quality preschools, give vital information to communities, support innovation, and instill accountability for schools. So, according to my research and findings, I think it's more individually focused. Its aim is to provide assistance for students to be better equipped to go to higher education or in the workforce. However, if the program proves more effective in sustaining these students, teachers, and schools, this will have a really positive effect on the families of those individuals involved. It's been addressing a lot of the symptoms of poor education within the United States, but the states are having more say in this act. They're required to submit a plan, different policies that will keep parents and communities involved. The problem falling through our cracks in the educational system, and not everyone is committed to that prevention. Some just don't get the chance to succeed the way they might be able to otherwise. Let's see. ESSA, the act I previously mentioned, has requirements that each state involved must develop and implement community and family engagement policies. The states must outline how underprivileged individuals will be treated equally. The ESSA requires also that the school receiving funding for this will notify and involve parents in plan. So what do we do? One option that I think is essential for individuals is to be involved with local government and in school politics and changes, especially because acts like the ESSA are implemented at that level, at the school and state levels. Parents and citizens should be involved in the community to remain informed and have a chance to be influential, like Lindsay mentioned earlier. Families also need to do their best to instill good values and attitudes about education to their children and friends. On the society level, I feel that more emphasis should be given on teacher training and payment. Teachers aren't always invested in their job or the children because they aren't being invested in. Many students would have a much different experience and possibly stay in school and avoid those dropouts if their teachers were more fully invested and effective. Educational acts reform and reforms such as the ESSA need to put more focus on the student's achievement and not simply assessment scores. If more emphasis is continued to be put on education and increased opportunities for all, despite status or other factors, people like my dear family members would possibly be able to find more ability to complete their goals. Individuals who desperately need the education in order to succeed financially, as well as in other areas, will be immensely benefited if our legislators and leaders will take more serious action towards empowering our generations with knowledge. So that's it. Any questions?
How can we make higher education more accessible and affordable?
I know, I can't remember where I heard it, but I know that I think the state of New York has been pushing for like free college. I think that's what it is. I'm not totally sure. I feel like I saw something on that lately, but I don't know necessarily that I agree with free college for everybody. Because not everybody wants to go to college, and it's like who would pay for it? We already have so much debt, but I feel like giving. I know that like BYUI gives a lot of like we have scholarships and things like that, but I think that just making things a little bit more affordable. I know that's really hard to do when you've got professors to pay and things to do with it, but I just feel like there might be some outlets in education that we can cut down on in order to make like tuition and things like that more affordable. I don't know, that's my initial thought. I know there's more, but yeah.
Okay.
What do you think if you could ask a teacher to be more invested, what would be the one thing that you would ask them to do to get them more involved with their students so they felt like they were more connected?
I think the most effective teachers I had, who I felt like were invested in me, weren't so focused on we have to get through chapter 15 by this date. They were more focused on, okay, you're not really understanding this concept. How can we approach it better? Or what else can we do? Or they would readdress things rather than, okay, we'll go see the tutor, type of a thing. I think that teachers need to be more focused on that aspect of teaching, making sure students are actually taught for retaining and not just test taking. I think that's one of the biggest things that I remember about my teachers was that they took time with students and weren't so focused on what the state was telling them or the federal government was telling them to do. I know that's a big movement to make because we are so focused on those tests now and catching up with other countries and stuff like that. But I think that personally for me is one of the most effective ways to help them be more invested is just to notice the student and what's going on.
Right.
I have one more question. I wrote this article last week for a different class, and they quoted sociologist James Rosenbaum, and he talked about the term college for all, basically that everyone, regardless of interest or ability, should go to college. Do you think everyone should go to college, that that's something that should be pushed, or that there are other ways to be successful?
I don't think everyone needs to go to college because not everybody wants to. And the things that they're interested in and that they're good at don't always require a bachelor's degree. And I think that if we push people to do that, that we could do more harm than good. Because, I mean, like high school for me individually and personally, I think it's really important because it's like a really basic level almost just to even just get a job. They want to see that you graduated. I feel like a lot of places do. And so I don't know if I agree with college for all. College is important. It's been great for me and great for a lot of people that I know. But some people I know right now are really successful and they just get it and they've never attended a college class. So, well, thanks, guys.
Okay. Thanks. All right. So my topic is, I'm Andrina Rylick, and my topic is violence. And I'm going to actually cover 3 topics because they're all related as a threat to family: domestic violence, divorce, and sexual education. I know you touched on that, Lindsay, because it sounded like a lot of your stats were from the same site I was getting them. Okay, so just a little backstory on me. I come from a home, my parents were divorced when I was 4 years old, and my mom never remarried my stepfather or married my stepfather until 18 years after they were dating. So they cohabitated for 18 years. How that affected me is that as a young adolescent at 15, I ran with the wrong crowd. I did have antisocial behaviors. I did drugs. I got pregnant. I kept my kid. Like, I just did things that were like, but when I see these statistics, I'm like, oh, wow, that's what was supposed to happen, because I would have really needed some guidance and direction for that not to happen. And then as I've gotten older and I didn't go to school, I just went straight into the workforce and just stayed in the workforce until I started coming to BYU just recently. And I just turned 40. So I'm barely getting my act together. And it's been a hard look as I learn all of these statistics of, wow, what's going on? So one bullet that I feel like I dodged is violence. And as I was doing some research, I'm like, wow, domestic violence is part of this path that I am on. How did that not happen to me? Because women in my situation, 85% of them experience violent crimes or intimate partner abuse. And I thought, wow, how many partners did I have since I became a mother till now? And at what moment could one of those guys just snapped on me and I could have been seriously injured, or my son? And I started to look into that and I thought, wow, this is something that I don't know anything about because I personally haven't witnessed it. And what I found was that 85% of domestic violence or intimate partner acts are against women. That's a lot. And 19% of those crimes involve a weapon. So there's a knife or a gun present, and 15% of them happen in front of a child. So then there's another statistic that concerned me was, well, how about all of these children? What happens to them? So we look at that and say, okay, what's happening to them? Are they physically abused? Surprisingly, a lot of domestic violence homes, not all of the children are abused physically. What they do get is emotional and maltreatment. So, and there's 93% of them suffer in some form. So what does that abuse look like? The first one was seeing the actual incident would be exposing them, hearing threats to their parent that's being abused, or fighting noises, and just observing the aftermath, the blood, the ripped clothes, the broken arm, the black eye. That is a form of abuse. And the National Child Traumatic Stress Network reported that in 2007, children that aren't physically abused suffer emotionally and psychological trauma that is shown as PTSD as they get older. And they can actually feel the tension phase that builds up to the battering phase. And it's very difficult for them. The costs that the National Child Traumatic Stress Network reported is that an estimated $70.7 billion are spent on hospitalization, mental health care, child welfare, and law enforcement just on domestic violence cases alone. The children that are involved in those cases, there's another $33.1 billion being spent on special education services, juvenile delinquency, and as they get older, the criminal justice system and the long-term effects that they have from that. So, wow, I was just like, man, how could we fix this? This is a big problem. And it all comes back to marriages and just the decline in marriage. The Journal of Marriage and Family published an article in 1994 that was titled Women's Education, Marital Violence, and Divorces. And it was a longitudinal study that went for 5 years, 1975 to 1979, and then again, the same group of women from 1990 to 1994. And they looked at these women and they said, wow, there was a 10% drop in divorce rates among this group of people. What changed? Well, they got 4-year degrees. So what changed was their education. As the education for women increased, the rate of divorce went down and their exposure to domestic violence went down. Their SES went up. And the group of women who had an increase in divorce rates from the same group were all women who did not have beyond a high school education. So they had high school education or lower. And so seeing how education impacts the decisions that women will make is huge. One state, so I started to look at my state that I'm in right now, Tennessee, and in the South, there are a few states that we kind of mirror each other, but there was one state that stood out, and it was Arkansas. And one thing that came up was teen pregnancy. They're ranked fourth in the state, for fourth in the country for teen pregnancy. They also are number 4 for the most divorces. And they are number 4 for the most domestic violence against women. So when you take all of these stats and you go, okay, wait a second, you rank the same, 4th place for divorces, you're 4th place for teen pregnancies, and you're 4th place for domestic violence. That sounds like they're all related. If your divorce rates were lower, would these young women be getting into this sexual behavior? And would they have mothers that could teach them and help them? And so some policies that Arkansas has come up with in the state, they adopted in 2015 was a maturation program for 6th to 8th grade and then it continues again in high school, but the 6th to 8th graders get a maturation education plan. So they segregate boys from girls and they teach them sexual education for their age. And then when they're in high school, 9th through 12th grade, they offer parenting classes. They offer emotional wellness classes. They're offering all of these classes. And parents do have the option to opt out, but parents are being shown the studies, the research that proves if your children have this, they won't face these same cycles that you're facing. So some statistics that stood out why I picked Arkansas is that 1.14% of children under the age of 15 reported being sexually active. That's a big number for under 15. 15 to 17-year-olds, 25% were sexually active. And hold on to yourself, 75.17% of teens in 2015, teen women, 18 to 19 years old, had birthed a child.
Wow.
That's so when we looked at this, I started to look at the other statistics since they implemented this program in 2015, what research is coming of it. Well, STIs have gone down 35% in 2016 because they started that program for the 15 to 19-year-olds. So now we're starting to see some results for the kids that are participating in it, and we can see that education is key for all of this, and it's all connected. So I just feel strongly now that education will empower victims, and we can help the youth by giving them direction in relationship education and sexual education, because this is a serious social issue. Domestic violence is serious, divorce is serious, and sexual education, it's all connected. And I just believe strongly that we definitely need to help from the inside of the family out, and we have to do it through schools, because that's the only way we can really reach everybody at once. Thanks for listening to my presentation.
That was great. Thank you.
I'll comment while Michelle's thinking there for a minute.
What do I want to say?
I can tell you're going to say something, but I feel like you brought all of our speeches together so far. The brother I mentioned was very physically abused, had a broken leg, and he was 18 months old. So and then you talked about sex education, and I don't know, I feel like you brought it all together to really point out that family really does center in all of these topics that we're struggling with.
Right. And education. In everybody else, education was the link to solving some of these problems. And so I see it in my work, kids that haven't been abused but are suffering PSTD because of the abuse they've witnessed. And even little kids that, parents are trying to say, oh, they don't remember what happened. They were too young. Well, they're acting out in ways they can't verbalize, but they are having trauma. So it does affect the family. And that's not a question, it's just a comment, I guess. So I think you nailed it. Okay, any other comments? Okay, I'm going to go with mine. Mine is really personal. So my name is Michelle Gordon, and my threat is the threat of pornography on the family. Last February marks the 1-year anniversary that I discovered my husband had hired a very expensive hooker. I happened to overhear him bragging about the experience to his brother. This didn't happen out of the blue. It didn't happen because he was not having a sexual relationship with me, his wife of almost 30 years. It happened because of his addiction to pornography. My husband became addicted to pornography while he was in high school, long before he met me. Many pornography addicts speak of becoming addicted during their adolescence. Developing intimacy skills is an important part of adolescent male psychosexual development, as it is in this way that sex and love are brought together, allowing successful, satisfying adult relationships. Pornography, however, is about emotional distance. I didn't find out about his pornography addiction until we had been married for almost 10 years. I know he struggled to stop and was successful for long periods of time, but the needs always came back. When I found out, I was a stay-at-home mom with 3 small children, and he immediately blamed me for not fulfilling his needs, and that was why he had turned to porn. I felt shame, guilt, and embarrassment almost as strongly as he did, and tried to fix the problem. He would never admit that it was his problem and would never seek help. When we had arguments about this, he would promise to stop. When I asked him how he was doing, he would say he was fine. This went on for another 10 years. In his mind, the problem was never with him, it was always with me. This created a lack of trust and intimacy on my part, and the wedge between us kept growing. With the ease of pornography on the internet, he was able to hide his addiction better and had easier access, so the problem became worse. In his mind, I was not fulfilling his needs, so he kept looking for more. For most men, this subject is diluted to this is just what men do, but pornography creates a misguided representation of what the most important relationships in life is supposed to be like. For some, these unhealthy expressions of sexuality are a means of escape. For others, they are forms of self-medication. However, the result is the same for all. Pornography prevents users from living in a state of truth, integrity, and peace. Pornography destroys relationships by putting distance between couples. It attacks users through shame, sexual addictions, and profound confusion as to what normal sexuality really is. In the end, it destroys people's capacity for intimacy. Finally, he started to detach from our family, blaming it on work, and then he started looking into hiring a hooker, even spending several months researching how not to get arrested and to find the best place to contact them. Why am I telling this story now? I can't hide behind the shame and the guilt that I've lived with for years. Taking the blame for something my husband did and would not seek help for. Because of my shame and guilt and embarrassment, I was an enabler to his problem. We were not able to fix this on our own. We needed to seek help, and we didn't. Now our family is being torn apart by his actions. A recent study involving 20,000 people found that married individuals who have watched pornographic material the previous year are 25% more likely to be divorced. Pornography not only ruined our intimate relationship, but it also changed the man that my husband once was. He refuses to take responsibility for his actions, and this is coming out in other aspects of his life that are equally damaging as pornography. We have faced many other hardships because of the lack of trust and intimacy. It affected our decision-making in other areas of our marriage, including financial decisions. If my story can encourage even one person to seek help, stop the shame and embarrassment, then telling my story is worth it. I will not hide behind the shame and guilt any longer. I would like to see policy enacted that proclaims pornography as a public health risk. Currently, there are 3 states, Utah, Kansas, and Florida, that have passed resolutions stating that pornography is a public health risk. This does not change any laws, but it acknowledges that pornography is a problematic issue. It raises awareness of the destructive nature of pornography and sheds light on the fact that there is a problem. Proponents of these resolutions claim that pornography needs to be treated like a disease, and it needs to be eliminated. While this is not likely to happen, the more we can talk about the addictive powers and damaging effects of pornography and bring it out in the open, educating others on the damaging effects, it will help remove the shaming, and get better help, get the society will be better at addressing this issue. In an article from healthline.com, they state, with a multitude of potentially negative repercussions, from mental health issues to domestic violence, Hodge said it is not a stretch to include that porn industry as one with negative influences on community health. We can take action by contacting our local representatives and state representatives and voicing our concerns for this public health risk. We can get petitions started and circulated to show our representatives that this is a concern for the citizens of their area and state. I believe there's a strong case to be made for declaring pornography a public health risk. And by doing so, it will not make pornography illegal or something that you can't do, but it will then be recognized for what it is, a severe risk to families. And that's it. Any questions?
I know that must have been really hard to write out and read, and thank you for sharing such a personal story with us.
I was hoping not to get emotional,
No, it's okay to do that. That was unexpected, and it was very informative.
I think getting emotional is part of not feeling guilty. Removing that shame is that it's something that happened in your life, and moving forward from that, I think, is being emotional about it.
Thank you.
Very well done. Good use of personal experience and statistics. Very well done.
Hey, that's a good note to end on, right?
Right.
Okay, so any other questions?
No.
That's good.
I don't think so.
I'm doing okay, by the way. So I'm surviving.
Okay.
Was there somewhere that I have all of your emails? Like we need that for the evaluation.
What we did was went back to the Google Hangout, where we posted the Google Hangout and our topics,
Hmm.
and just added our emails to that.
Oh,
So go back
yeah.
there, add yours. Well, everybody's email will be in one spot.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to stop the broadcast.